Hello everybody, Mr. Effect Films here yet again. So, gonna be doing something a little different from what I normally do. I've just kind of been in a big Marvel mood as of late. I've been rewatching a lot of the MCU movies and stuff, reading some of the comics and all that. So, this is gonna be me doing. This is gonna be a three-part series. The first one, which is here, is going to be a retrospective on Phase 1 of the MCU films. So Iron Man, Iron Man 2, Thor, Incredible Hulk, Captain America, the first Avenger, and the Avengers, the first movie, obviously. And then the next video will be me doing everything from Phase 2, so, Iron Man 3, Captain America the Winter Soldier, Thor the Dark World, Guardians of the Galaxy, Ant-Man, and Age of Ultron. And then the third video will basically just be in speculations on the Phase 3 MCU films and what we can currently expect from them, or at least what I'm expecting from them and stuff like that. So yeah, that'll be a lot of fun. But like I said, this is just going to be me focusing on the MCU films of Phase 1. So let's go ahead and without further ado, get started. So starting off, we have the first Iron Man movie, which came out back in 2008. Man, what can I say about this movie that hasn't already been said? It's great. It's still one of my favorites from the whole MCU. It's still my favorite of the Iron Man movies, even though, and I'll say this later when I talk about Phase 2, I do think Iron Man 3 is a better movie than Iron Man 1, but I just like and I enjoy Iron Man 1 more. So it's still my favorite of the solo Iron Man films, but like I said, I do think Iron Man 3 is a better movie. This just has everything you could really want in a superhero origin story. I've heard some people complain about Obadiah Stane as the villain and how he's not that great. Well, first of all, let me just say, I think Jeff Bridges does a great job portraying Obadiah Stane. But I will admit he's not given a whole lot of material to work with, and by the end is just kind of a serviceable villain at best. I don't have a huge problem with that. I mean, I think it's fine, especially since by the time we get to Iron Man 3, we're dealing with what I think is a great villain. I know some people will disagree with that, but whatever. I think he's a great villain. And we'll talk about that a little more when I get to Iron Man 2, but I'll save that for when we get there. But yeah, and obviously Robert Downey Jr.'s portrayal of Tony Stark is just out of this world. It's great. It's something that at the time we hadn't seen a lot of. We're starting to get a little more of this now. People who aren't just the stereotypical, either they're a complete douchebag and don't care about anyone or anything except themselves, and by the end of the film learn to be a better person or something like that, or it's the Peter Parker thing of they're a good person and they want to do what's right, but they're too scared and they're not courageous enough, and by the end they learn to be more assertive and stand up for themselves, and by extension they learn to stand up for everybody else, which is what makes them a superhero in the end. Tony Stark is kind of a blending of the two. He's not a bad guy at heart. At heart, Tony Stark is clearly somebody who wants to do the right thing, but he doesn't really know what the right thing is right now. Which is of course is the whole point of the whole first act when he is trapped in the cave. He's kind of learning what it means to do the right thing, so that when he gets out and he goes back home, he can start doing the right thing. And he starts by shutting down. The weapons division of Stark Industries, which of course everybody is like, "Dude, you're crazy. What are you doing?" And he's just like, "I don't care. I don't care if you all think I'm crazy. It's the right thing to do, so I'm doing it." And he pays for it. His stocks plummet. Everybody turns against him. Everybody thinks he's crazy. Obadiah Stane at this point basically tries to take the company from him, after, of course, we find out that he is essentially the villain of the piece because they try to have him killed. But still, I think that all works too. Even, Obadiah Stane, his trusted friend and partner, tries to take his own company from him because he's like, no, this dude is freaking crazy. So yeah, all of that I think is great. I think Tony's character arc from selfish guy who kind of sort of wants to do the right thing to still being kind of egotistical, but a little less selfish and on the path to becoming a better person by the end. I think that whole character arc is done really, really well, and it sets up for some great things that'll happen later in the MCU. Terrence Howard as Rhodey. You know, it's funny. When I first saw this movie, I thought Terrence Howard did a really good job as Rhodey. But now that I've actually read some Iron Man comics and I know the character a little well, and especially after seeing Don Cheadle portray Rhodey, I can't say I disagree with the choice to recast. And especially when I heard what a complete jerk Terrence Howard was on set. Apparently he was just really mean to everybody. He was demanding more money if he was going to be in the sequel and all of this. So they just said, you know what, we've had it. We're going to get rid of him. And they recast him. And like I said, as of right now, I have to say, I think they made the right choice. I didn't like it at the time, but I've come to like it now, and I think they made the right choice. So, Gwyneth Paltrow, I think, does really, really good as Pepper Potts, who was a character that at the time I wasn't all that familiar with. I should also say, I wasn't really a big Iron Man fan when I first saw this movie. I knew who Tony was, and I think I may have seen him in a few comics or whatever, but I didn't really know much about Tony. Like, literally, all I knew about Iron Man was he's a dude who wears a suit of armor, and his secret identity is Tony Stark. That's literally all I knew about him. This movie was my first real exposure to Tony Stark as a character, because I just didn't know much about him at the time. And especially, like, my dad is kind of a big superhero fan too. He knew nothing about Tony Stark at the time either. So for me and pretty much everyone I knew, this was our introduction to our first real introduction to the character of Tony and the world that Iron Man inhabits. And I think this was a really, really good one. But like I was saying about Gwyneth Paltrow, she does well enough. I think she's given just enough to do that her presence here is justified. But it also kind of establishes the core of her and Tony's relationship. The fact that, you know, Tony is maybe a little self-destructive at times, but at the end of the day, he's always trying to do at least what he thinks is right, and that's kind of what she finds charming about him. It's not necessarily his wit or his humor or anything. I mean, she obviously is kind of charmed by that too, but what she really likes about Tony is the fact that despite his methods and despite what he might do in the moment, in his heart, he's always trying to do what's right, or at least what he thinks is right. So all of that, I think, really, really works. Obviously, the effects are fantastic. The CG for both for its time and even now, I think it still holds up really, really well. Everything involving Tony and his suits is still spectacular. I still love watching him work on his suit, learn how to use it, build it. That scene where he suits up for the first time and goes and fights the terrorists and everything is just a joy to see every single time, and I really, really love it. And then, of course, the famous after-credits scene where Nick Fury shows up and says, you know, I want to talk to you about the Avengers Initiative. A lot of people still say that's the best after-credits scene so far. I can totally see why they say that, and it's still one of my favorites, but I can't say it's the best. I'll talk about my favorite after-credits scene towards the end of this, but I can definitely see why people say that, and it's not totally unwarranted. It's a very good one, and especially the fact that a lot of people didn't even know it was coming. Me and my family, we would have missed it if not for somebody. I think it was the dude sitting in front of us at the theater. I think it was the dude sitting in front of us. He told us, stay after the credits because there's another scene. If he hadn't said that, we would have walked out and we would have missed it. We would have never known it was there. So that was great. The fact that we all got to see that coming. And of course, the fact that Sam Jackson was playing Nick Fury was just a joy, because I love the Ultimates story in the comics, and his design there was very clearly based on Sam Jackson. So to see Sam Jackson actually play Nick Fury was just a joy. I thought that was great. So yeah, Iron Man 1, great movie. Still my favorite Iron Man movie so far, and a fantastic start to the MCU. Alright, so next up we have The Incredible Hulk, which came out the same year. As far as I know, this movie wasn't received anywhere near as well as the first Iron Man was, but I think it's about as good, if slightly less enjoyable. And I think that's the key word. I think this Incredible Hulk movie and Iron Man, as far as being objectively good movies, I think they're about on the same level. The first Iron Man movie, I think, is just a little more enjoyable, which is fine. Really, my only regret is that we never got to see a straight up Hulk movie sequel after this, which is especially a shame considering that they set up the leader to be a thing later on, and that still has not paid off. So I can only assume that that's never going to be a thing again, and that's a shame. I I think Ed Norton does a really good job portraying Bruce Banner, but in a similar vein to what I said about not Terrence Stamp, I'm sorry, that is something very different, Terrence Howard with his portrayal of Rhodey, I think Ed Norton did a good job playing Bruce Banner, but based on everything I've heard about him and how difficult of an actor he is to work with, and how demanding he was about several things during the making of this movie and all this, I think they made the right choice in recasting him too. I don't know. It's a really sticky situation with a lot of these recasts of just not being able to deal with a certain actor because they're just really uncompromising and just so difficult to work with that they're just like, you know what, this is going to be better on everybody if we just recast. And for the most part, I think they're done when they need to be done, and I can't really disagree with it for the most part. So there's that. I forget the dude's name who plays General Ross. Or Thunderbolt Ross, whatever you want to call him. But he does all right. He's not given a ton to do, given enough to work with. But as far as I'm concerned, he didn't really need it. The movie is about Bruce and Betty. I didn't really need too much with him, especially since his whole purpose in this movie is just to give Bruce a reason to keep running and keep running and keep running and keep running as he tries to find a cure. So that's not a big deal to me. The Hulk looks great in this. I know a lot of people have said that they think the Hulk we get in Avengers and from then onwards is the best Hulk we've ever gotten. I still say that's the second best. I think the Hulk we get in this movie is still the best Hulk we've ever gotten so far. I love how the Hulk looks, how he moves, how he fights, how creative he is in battle. And to be fair, that is a trait that he has kept in the later MCU films. But still, I think this is still the best Hulk we've ever gotten, and I kind of miss it. I miss this look for the Hulk. But, you know what, whatever, it's fine. And then, of course, the Abomination. I'll say this. The Abomination doesn't look particularly great, but I think he looks good enough that I'm able to roll with it, and I'm able to buy it, I guess. And the fight downtown with him and the Hulk is still one of my favorite superhero fights in any movie I've seen. I love the fight with the Hulk and the Abomination. It looks great. So yeah, a lot of these actors and actresses in this movie, I can't remember their names, so I'm going to kind of gloss over that. And if I gloss over that going forward, just know that it's probably just because I don't remember their names, so I don't want to sound mean or, insensitive or anything like that. So just know that for going forward. But, yeah, for the most part, this is a cool movie and it's really fun. I think when you compare it to Iron Man 1, it's just that it's not quite as enjoyable as that first Iron Man movie is, and so therefore a lot of people say it's not as good. I don't think it's not as good. I think they're about on the same level. It's just one's more enjoyable than the other. So, but yes, that's it. Incredible Hulk. And I should also mention, because I'd be remiss if I didn't mention, the after credits scene we get in this movie is very, very strange to think about in retrospect, because the after credits scene in The Incredible Hulk is very indicative of the direction the MCU was heading in, and obviously it never went down that road. The after credits scene here shows Tony going into a bar, meeting up with General Ross, and telling him, hey, we're putting together a team, and obviously he's talking about the Avengers. For those of you who don't know, this is because at the time, the idea was that they were going to follow the Ultimates story a little bit, in that the Avengers are put together to hunt down and find the Hulk. That's basically what happens in the story The Ultimates, and that's kind of the direction that the MCU was going down. Now Iron Man 2 and then Thor and then Captain America the First Avenger changed that up, obviously, and they ended up going for something a little bit closer to the original 616 story for the Avengers that came out back in like the 60s, I want to say. But at the time, that's the direction these movies are going in, and that's why this after credit scene doesn't really seem to mesh well with everything we get after. But it's still a good scene. It's still well written. It's well acted for the most part, and I still like it, even if it doesn't really mean anything in retrospect. But it's still cool, and I still like it enough. And it was just really good to see sort of validation of the fact that this is one big universe. Seeing Tony Stark in a Hulk movie, I don't think I'd ever seen something like that before. That was just really, really cool. Like I said, it kind of served as validation of this is in fact a larger universe. So yeah, that was really cool. And yeah, The Incredible Hulk, good movie, about as good as Iron Man 1, if a little less enjoyable. That's really the best I can say about it. So yeah. So then we move on to Iron Man 2. Now, I'm just going to go ahead and front load this with me saying, this is about as negative as I'm going to get with this entire series. Because Iron Man 2 is my least favorite of all of the MCU films thus far. I'm not saying it's a terrible movie, I'm not saying it's an awful movie, but it is the worst one we've gotten so far. Let me explain. And this is what makes it even worse in my mind. The first act of Iron Man 2 is great. I really, really, really like the first act. It sets up the movie to be... This is what makes it so upsetting. The first act of Iron Man 2 sets this movie up to potentially be better than Iron Man 1. You could have easily made a better movie than Iron Man 1 with the direction the first act was going in, and then it does absolutely nothing with it. Everything that follows that first act is just lame joke after lame joke. It's just... Oh my god, this movie is really frustrating. Okay. So let me start with the villain, Whiplash. I'll get to Justin Hammer in a minute. Believe me, I will get to Justin Hammer in a minute. But for now, let's focus on Whiplash, okay? First of all... Oh, dang it, what's the actor's name? I just had it. I'm sorry, I can't remember the actor's name. The guy, Whiplash, he was also Marv in Sin City. Mickey Rourke, that's his name, Mickey Rourke. Casting Mickey Rourke as Whiplash, I think, was a great move. And especially when you find out about all of the work that Mickey Rourke put into wanting to play Whiplash, the fact that he worked on a Russian accent specifically for this role and everything. From what I understand, the fact that he has that bird was his idea. He just thought it added some extra flavor to the character and everything. He clearly put a lot of work into this role and was interested in doing something with it. And, oh my god, okay. His initial motivation in for doing what he does is great, and it makes perfect sense. And this of course all comes to a head when they fight on the racetrack, which is one of the best scenes in the movie. When Iron Man and Whiplash fight on that racetrack, that's a great scene and I love it. It kind of sets up the tone the movie's going for, and it sets up what I think was meant to be the conflict the movie was aiming for too. And that's all really good. And then it all rounds up in that interrogation scene later. But from that point onwards, this movie just spirals. It just plummets. Nothing that happens after that really makes any sense. Okay, I get that Tony is dying from palladium poisoning and from the arc reactor in his chest, but why then would he then go and get drunk at a party where he's then putting people's lives in danger? It just seems a little counterintuitive from when you take the lesson that he learned in the first Iron Man into account. That's just something about that just doesn't play right. And then, to add insult to injury, Rhodey then just shows up in one of his Iron Man suits without having any idea whatsoever of how to use it. He just uses it. Yeah. And then on top of that, they have a really pointless fight that doesn't really mean anything, and really only exists to set up the laser beam connection thingy they do later at the end of the movie, which could have been cool. You know, I like the idea that they take something that signified their friendship falling apart, and then in the end they use that after they become friends again to defeat their enemy. But yeah, this whole fight at the end of the day is meaningless. It doesn't really serve much of a purpose at all. I haven't talked about Black Widow yet, and I'm not really sure that I should, because there's not much to say about her in this movie. You know, Black Widow is utilized very, very well in Avengers 1, 2, Winter Soldier, and in Civil War. Because at the time of this recording, Civil War has come out. she's utilized great in every MCU movie she's in after this. But in this movie, she has no reason to be here. She serves absolutely no purpose. I would have been perfectly fine with them just simply introducing her in the Avengers. And I think a lot of people would have been cool with that too. So, yeah, not a lot to say about Black Widow, so I'm just going to move on. I mentioned Don Cheadle earlier with when I was talking about Iron Man 1, and like I said, I think he does portray Rhodey a lot better here than Terrence Howard did. Not that Terrence Howard portrayed him poorly, I just think Don Cheadle does it better. He's clearly having fun with the role as much as he possibly can anyways. And yeah, like I said, I think he does a good job. I think he portrays him well, and really, my issues with Rhodey in this have to do with what's written and not with what the actor is doing. So, there's that. I'm trying to think of something positive I can say about this, aside from everything in the first act. Okay. The fight with the mechs at the end is pretty cool. And of course, the moment when Tony gets out those red laser beam thingies and just finishes them all off, I couldn't help myself from cheering in the theater when I saw this. It was me, my dad, my little brother, and that was really cool. I couldn't help but cheer when I saw that. That was really cool. But yeah, like I said, this movie, it starts off really, really good, but it kind of ends up just becoming a big disappointment. And yeah, because of that, it's my least favorite of the MC movies. It's not as bad as it could have been. It's not a completely god-awful film, but if I could sum this movie up with one word or two words, it would be wasted potential. So much wasted potential with this movie. It could have been better than Iron Man 1, but ultimately what we have is Iron Man 2. Alright, so now we're going to move on to Thor. Which is good. I think something we can say about all of these MCU films, at least the Phase 1 movies, is that everything that makes these movies good isn't so much about how good the movie itself is, but how good the main character is. Everything people love about that first Iron Man movie doesn't really have to do with the movie itself. It has to do with Tony Stark and everything done with that particular character, right? And I guess Hulk would maybe be the exception, because the main reason people like that movie is because of the action, the fact that we get to see the Hulk. Well, and I guess it would be the same thing, but it's a little different because they like the Hulk and not necessarily Bruce Banner. And then Thor is very much a similar case. Chris Hemsworth plays Thor perfectly. I cannot think of a better person who could have portrayed the character of Thor better than Chris Hemsworth. He does a fantastic job. The whole Shakespearean dialect that he provides with his voice, his mannerisms, even the way he moves with like a majestic air to him. You know, he moves like an ancient Greek being you would expect them to move. Like I said, a very majestic air about him, and the way he just strides, and the way he moves and everything. It's all really, really cool. And then, of course, just his whole arc in this film about learning the lesson that being a hero isn't about going around smashing things up and being like, look at me, I'm so awesome. It's about understanding that being a hero for a living is inherently a life of service, and more importantly, a life of sacrifice. And that's really what Thor has to come to understand by the end of this film, which is cool, and I really like that. Obviously, the thing people talk about the most of this movie is Loki. I do really like Loki in this. He's really cool. He's given, I think, just enough development that we can understand where he's coming from, and so much that when he becomes the main villain in the Avengers, we totally get what his beef with Thor is and why he wants to take over Earth so much, because, Earth is the planet that Thor has come to love. He's called it as being, this planet's under my protection, so what better way to hurt Thor than to attack the place he loves most, right? So yeah, Loki's handled really, really well. Tom Hiddleston plays him really, really well, and everything written with him is really good too. Asgard looks fantastic. I love how Asgard looks. It kind of has a bit of a... How do I say this? I don't want to say Lord of the Rings because that's not really what I mean to say. It has a very strong fantasy era, a very strong fantastical vibe to it, which is exactly what it should have. You know, I like that we actually get to see the Rainbow Bridge, which is something that in the comics is really ridiculous, but in the movie they make it look really good. And then what's his name? Idris Elba as Heimdall. He doesn't get a lot to do in this, but my God, was that perfect casting. He nails the role of Heimdall. He's really cool. And of course, him in that big golden outfit, he looks awesome in that suit. And yeah, Heimdall's really awesome in this too. And I have to question the after credits scene in this movie too, because I'm not sure what exactly it means. I mean, because obviously, I'm sure none of us really thought Loki died when he fell into that wormhole thing, but what exactly did that after credits scene mean? I mean, because we see the scientist dude that Thor kind of befriends and everything, and Loki just kind of shows up in the mirror behind him, and he says, you know, oh, I suppose that's worth a look, and then the scientist says the same thing. What exactly did that mean? Because that doesn't really come back in the Avengers or in Thor 2. So what exactly did that mean? I don't know. I'm confused about that. Obviously, we have Natalie Portman as Jane Foster, who I think does well enough. I think she and Thor have a good enough chemistry with one another that it's believable that there's a connection. I wouldn't have had them kiss in this. I felt like that came a little prematurely. But yeah, whatever. I mean, I suppose that's, you know, typical Hollywood thing. I don't know. But whatever. At the end of the day, Thor is a very serviceable beginning origin film. And I know some people are getting tired of origin movies. Personally, if an origin story is told well, I will never get tired of them. I love a good origin story. It's why I don't have anywhere near as big a problem with these earlier MCU films as other people do. I love a good origin story. Again, I emphasize good one. I love a good origin story. So, movies like Iron Man 1 and Thor, they don't bother me. I like them. As long as they're done well, I'll be totally cool with it. So, yeah. So that's my thoughts on the first Thor film. And so now we move on to Captain America, the First Avenger. Of all of the movies of the Phase 1, this was the one I was the most skeptical about. I had no idea how you were going to possibly do Captain America and make me like, not so much make me like him, but make me think this dude is cool in any way. Not only do they accomplish this, Captain America, I think the only one in the MCU that is cooler than Captain America was Tony Stark. Now, let me go ahead and say, and I'll talk more about this when I talk about Phase 2. Captain America, as of right now, I actually like him more than Tony Stark now. He's become very multi-layered. He's become very... I think the thing that draws me more to Cap than to Tony is the fact that I relate a lot more to Steve than I do to Tony. Tony, I think... You know what I think it is? It's Han Solo and Luke Skywalker from the Star Wars movies. Your average fan will say they like Han Solo more because of how charismatic he is and how cool he is and how quick-witted he is and how quote-unquote badass he is and all that. But Luke, to me, was always the one that I liked more. First and foremost, because of how freaking relatable he is. I really, really like Luke. And the journey that he goes through, to me, is much more better. It's much more entertaining. And it just... I feel like it's much more... I feel like there's more relevance to it, I don't know, than what we get with Han. And I kind of have a similar thing here with Steve and Tony. Tony is very, very fun. He's very quick-witted. He's very charming, and I like that about him. But Steve, Steve is just more relatable. I connect more with this guy than I do with Tony. I just and not only that, but the way they view the world, the way they go about doing things, their opposing philosophies. I'm just drawn more to Steve at the end of the day. I'll talk about this when I talk about Phase 3. But going into Civil War, I was absolutely on Cap's side. There were some people, and I know a lot of people were on Tony's side. Honestly though, I think that has more to do with the fact that people just simply like Tony more. I don't think anyone on Tony's side actually agrees with him. I think they just simply like him more. Like I said, I think that has everything to do with just how, quick-witted he is and how, funny he is and how cool he is and all that. But to me, relatability goes a long way. And I absolutely have that here with Steve. He's a guy who just wants nothing more than to do the right thing. And as opposed to everybody else who wants to do the right thing but isn't quite sure what the right thing is or has to learn what the right thing is and all that, Steve from the beginning already has that understanding. What he lacks is the tools necessary to do the right thing. Tony already had the tools he needed. Bruce has the Hulk and his scientific mind. He already has what he needs. Thor is a freaking Asgardian. He already has what he needs. But that's what's interesting about Steve, is that the only thing he needs is his tools. The only thing he needs is his training. The only thing he needs is his shield and, of course, the super soldier serum. The only thing he's missing are his tools. As far as his mentality and his heart, he already has everything he needs there. All he needs is the tools to do what he needs to do. And of course, he's given several opportunities in this movie to change and to become more cynical and more ends justify the means heavy and all that. He's given several times to give into that, but he never takes them. And of course, I'm going to talk about that a lot more when we get to Winter Soldier, because that's arguably the crux of the whole movie. And that I think that's another thing that's so endearing to me about Steve, is that he will not compromise. He will not go against what he knows to be right. And I really like that about him. And then, of course, all of the action in this movie is great. I love how the shield is used. Well, first of all, I love the evolution of the shield. It starts out in the beginning before he even gets his training. It starts out as just that little trash can when he's fighting the bully, and then later on, after he gets juiced up, he uses the car door as a shield, and then he uses that little prototype shield thingy when he goes on his first mission to save Bucky. And then after that, he finally gets the vibranium shield. I love how the idea of the shield evolves throughout the film. That's really, really cool. The way the shield is used, how it bounces around and everything, and how he can even he'll simply use it to hold up and protect him. He can use it as a weapon. He can use it as a way to get around. The way the shield is used in this movie is very creative, and I love it. Obviously, we have Hugo Weaving as Red Skull, and he knocks it out of the park. I really like Hugo Weaving's portrayal as Red Skull. It's a shame, too, because from what I understand, Hugo Weaving really didn't like doing this movie that much, and he's not interested in returning, and that's a real shame, because he did such a great job. But at least we got one good performance out of him as Red Skull, so that's all well and cool. I wouldn't be opposed to them recasting later on, but I mean, I really do wish we could just simply get Hugo Weaving back, but yeah, well. I'm sorry, I was trying to remember if there was an after-credit scene, and there is, but from what I remember, the after-credit scene in this was just a teaser for the Avengers, so not much to say there because we've all seen the Avengers, obviously. But yeah, and then I wasn't going to mention Tommy Lee Jones as the Sergeant General guy, or whatever he is. I think he does well enough. It's Tommy Lee Jones. You know what you're going to get with a performance from him. And he does a good enough job. Not much to say there. And I think, what's his name? Sebastian Stan, who plays Bucky. I've heard some people say he didn't get enough screen time in this. I think he got just enough. I think he got just enough that we understand this is an important character in Steve's life, and I think it's also just enough to understand. I think just enough is done with him here that he. I think just enough's done with him here that it makes sense to bring him back for the Winter Soldier movie. So yeah, I think that's about all I can really say. I thought I would have more to say about the first Avenger, but yeah, most of what I had to say was just me explaining why I like Steve over Tony. But whatever. But that kind of goes back to what I was saying earlier. Most of what makes these earlier movies good isn't necessarily the movie itself; it's the main character in them. And Steve is a great character, so yeah, there's that. So I guess that's about all I have to say about Captain America: The First Avenger. So now we move on to the big one, the Avengers. My God, the Avengers, man. I still remember 2012 going to see the midnight showing for this movie, and it's one of those movies that I have a few of these, those movie-going experiences that I'll never forget as long as I live. One of my earliest ones is would have been back when I was a kid, when my dad took me to see Spider-Man for the first time. I'll never forget that as long as I live. That was such a great time. It was really cool. Another one would have been back in 2008 when The Dark Knight came out. Again, I'll never forget that as long as I live. And this is another one when I saw the Avengers. Again, this is one of those movie-going experiences I will never ever forget. This movie was an absolute blast. It was really cool. I remember because I actually had to work the day this movie came out, and so what me and some of my coworkers did, we all just kind of got together because I think we all ended up closing that day. So what a lot of us did was we all left, changed out, got dressed, showered, and everything, and then came back because the theater is actually right down the street from where my job is, or where it was, because like I said, I don't work there anymore. But the theater was right down the street from there, so we all left, came back. And some of them were cosplaying, which is cool. I really wish I could have cosplayed too, but I ended up just not. So that was kind of a shame. But yeah, and so we all met up, went down to the theater, and we all had such a great time. It was really, really fun. I remember when the movie was over, there was actually a news crew out there, and they interviewed some of us. They asked us how the movie was, and we were all like, "Oh, it was awesome. It was great." And it was. The movie was really, really cool. I think the thing that really got me the first time, it wasn't just simply how fun and how amazing the movie was and how well executed it was. It was the fact that none of the characters felt shafted to me. Even though I know some people will say Hawkeye was kind of maybe a little shafted, I don't think he was. I think he was utilized enough. I mean, I think it was fine. Everybody, Tony, Steve, Bruce, what's her name, Natasha, Nick Fury, everybody, I forget somebody, Thor. Everybody gets just enough to do. They all get their own moments to shine, and they all get solid enough character arcs in this movie that all of their existence here feels justified. The fact that they all start off not really liking each other that much and have to learn to work together and become a team, while it might be obvious and a little spelled out, I still think it works. I still think it's really, really cool and really, really set up. There's a lot of foreshadowing to what's going to be revealed and found out in The Winter Soldier, which is really funny when you consider that I guess I'll just go ahead and say it, the whole Hydra reveal, the fact that we find out that Hydra has been infiltrating and growing throughout S.H.I.E.L.D. all this time. The fact that they just kind of came up with that when they did the Winter Soldier film is really, really surprising in retrospect, because not only does it fit so well, it makes you look back on movies like the first Avengers very, very differently. Because, well, that means Hydra finally would have almost gotten their hands on the Tesseract, which is really, really crazy to think about in retrospect, right? I mean, it's just that's just crazy. The fact that they're talking about, how Steve confronts Fury about how they're using the Tesseract to make weapons. Well, isn't that exactly what Hydra was doing in the first Captain America movie? It makes perfect sense when you think about it, and especially in retrospect, but the fact that that was never intended to be the case, that's crazy, man. It's one of those happy accidents that just works so well that you can't imagine the universe without it now, and it just works so perfectly. Nick Fury, I'm sorry, Sam Jackson does great as Nick Fury. I think he gets just enough of a solidified arc in this movie too, and just enough to do himself that he gets his own moments to shine. And then, of course, I have to mention Tom Hiddleston as Loki. This is still, I think, the best movie Loki's ever been in. I think he gives the best performance so far here, even though I will say his performance in Thor 2 maybe comes close, and I think his character is given a bit more depth there than it is here. But just simply as far as what all he's doing and, his reason for being here, I think this is still Loki's best movie so far. And then, of course, we're already in this movie. We're at the end of Phase 1, but in this movie, we're already planting the seeds for Civil War. I have a hard time believing Civil War wasn't at least being tossed around as an idea at Marvel at this point in time. Because the fact that we right away create a rivalry between Cap and Tony, that can't have been an accident. There's no way that could have been an accident. Civil War had to have been at least talked about as an idea or as a conceptual thing at this point. It had to have been. They're already planting the seeds for it, and they all come out so naturally. The scene where Cap asks Tony, he tells him, "Big man in a suit of armor, take that away, and what are you?" You can't tell me that's getting everyone ready for what's going to happen in Civil War. It's got to be, right? Oh, man. So, yeah, like I said, this movie is just an absolute blast. The whole third act is just one mega giant action scene, and it does not disappoint. It looks great. It's handled great. It's all well directed. It's shot beautifully. I can't say enough good things about it. It's just really, really great. At the end of the day, a great end to the first phase of the whole MCU, and it just leaves you with the anticipation of how in the world can they possibly top this? What can you possibly do better than this, right? And then, of course, we have to talk about the after credits scene, which to this day, I think this is my favorite after credits scene. I told you I'd get back to this, and here it is. When we get the reveal of Thanos at the end of this movie, this is my favorite after credits scene to date, because it's not just setting up another character or another plot point. This is setting up what I think is going to end up becoming a status quo changing event. Obviously this is them planting the seeds for what will become the Infinity War, right? I have a strong suspicion, and I'll talk about this when I do my speculations on Phase 3. I think that when Thanos shows up in the Infinity War and that whole battle goes down, I think this is going to be a big, massive status quo changing event that's going to forever shape the future of the MCU. Which means that they're not just simply setting up another villain, they're setting up the thing that's going to forever change this whole universe. Which is great, because the first after credits scene with Nick Fury showing up in Iron Man was doing the same thing. It was setting up for the Avengers, which was the thing that forever changed the MCU, right? And the first Avengers movie is now doing the same thing, and I think that's brilliant. So I think I've yammered on long enough about the Avengers. It's really, really great. I love it. And I think the MCU from here on would only get better, with some exceptions. But I think for the most part, the MCU from here on out would only get better. But we'll talk about that next time when I talk about Phase 2. So, I hope you all enjoyed this first in my MCU retrospective. And I'll see you all next time. So until then, peace out.